All right, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin kama tuhibbu wa tarda lahu. Now we are actually trying to cover the endochondral ossification. This endochondral ossification means that now the bones they are developed from the cartilage model of system. The cartilage model, in that cartilage model, it is actually initially it is the cartilage, and through that cartilage a bone is derived. So this is the cartilaginous model, and in other words, it is called enchondral ossification. Remember one thing, that this model works in the 8th week of intrauterine life. In that 8th week of intrauterine life, there is a cartilage, and that cartilage, if you can appreciate this blue color means that the surface, the outer surface of the cartilage is which is called perichondrium. What is that called? Perichondrium. This perichondrium is composed of chondrocytes. The chondrocytes are not only present on the outer surface, but they are also present within the cartilage. So this is the cartilage, but this cartilage, in that cartilage system, it takes from 8th week of intrauterine life to the 3rd month, when in the intrauterine life it becomes the primary center of ossification, and that is the point when the diaphysis growth start take place. So that's why in the ultrasound of a pregnant lady, you always check the age of the, or the time, intrauterine date of pregnancy, date of delivery, or you can check the size of the baby by checking the length of the bone. But you always check after 3 to 4 months of pregnancy, not within 3 months, because the bones are actually not forming in that process in that way precisely. See, in this 3rd month of pregnancy, now the question arises how this cartilaginous model they evolve into a bone, or they evolve into a primary center of ossification, because we all should know that it is the primary center of ossification, this primary center of ossification, which is important, of or presenting a soil where, or presenting a platform where the future bone has to grow. So remember one thing, that there are two secondary ossification centers, and one is the primary ossification center, which is present in the center. If I can see, make it visible for you. If, for example, this is the bone, then there are one secondary ossification center at one end, second ossification center at other end, and primary ossification center is present in the center of the shaft. Now this primary center of ossification, it takes its role in the 3rd month of pregnancy, and from the 3rd month of pregnancy to till the end of the pregnancy, or the 9th month of pregnancy, when the baby is going to born, this second primary ossification center, it's playing its role in the bone formation. And typically, which part of the bone is formed by the primary ossification center? Primary ossification center, POC. That bone is basically the diaphysis. What is diaphysis? Diaphysis is basically the shaft of the long bone. Remember one thing, that the endochondral ossification is taking place in the long bones. In the long bones. So the shaft is formed by the primary center of ossification. This is primary center of ossification. So what happens, that the initially the the cartilage, the chondrocytes are present in a cavity, and that cavity is called lacunae. What is that called? Lacunae. Now the chondrocytes will increase in the size. When something is increased in the size, we call it as hyper trophy, what we call hypertrophy. So when there is an increase in the size of the cell, the this is for example a chondrocyte, and the red color is basically the matrix. So what happened is that when the chondrocytes hypertrophy occur, there is increase in the matrix around that chondrocyte, and that matrix, because of that matrix and because of the release of some enzymes, this matrix becomes calcified. So this matrix become calcified. The blue color is showing the matrix has been calcified. Now why, what is the effect of this calcified matrix around that chondrocyte? What will happen when the matrix is calcified? For example, if this matrix is calcified, no blood vessel can supply blood to the chondrocyte, which is very important for the viability, which is very important for the life of that chondrocyte. So because of the highly calcified matrix around that chondrocyte, the blood supply is unable to deliver the oxygen and nutrition to that chondrocyte, and this chondrocyte automatically lead to programmed cell death, which is in pathology we call it as apoptosis. So that is how the apoptosis or the programmed cell death occurs. And when the programmed cell death occurs, like this, for example, when the programmed cell death occurs, if this is the calcified material, if this is the calcified material, now because of the death, this cavity where technically there was chondrocyte, it is now empty. It is now empty. So this is basically empty spaces present now. These empty spaces, they are present in that shaft or in that area of ossification, which is the primary center of ossification, but these empty spaces are still covered by the chondrocytes. Now what happened is, in the meanwhile, at the same time, the perichondrium is now being replaced. It is now replaced by the bony layer, which is called periosteum. I think Rishna has asked me in the last lecture what is periosteum, and I think I told her, for her memory and for the others, periosteum is basically the outer surface of the bone. What is that? Outer surface of the bone. Outer surface of the bone. There is another layer which is lining the inside medullary cavity, and this is also a layer of bone which is called endosteum. What is that called? Endosteum. That is called endosteum. So the endosteum is also there. Now what happened is that, as we know that this bone, the yellow color, you can appreciate this yellow color. This yellow color matrix is showing that the perichondrium is replaced by periosteum, and periosteum has osteoblastic cells, which is responsible for the making of the subcollar bone. This is the subcollar or the subperiosteal bone formation is now started taking place because of the osteoblasts which are present in the periosteum. Now what happened is that from the periosteum, now the periosteum is developed. The periosteum is uh, is developed. Now there are some blood vessels. You can appreciate these are the blood vessels which are coming from the periosteum, and in that blood vessels there are present the mesenchymal cells. Now for example, if there are present such mesenchymal cells, these mesenchymal cells along will transform into osteoclast cells, and they also transform into osteoblast cells. What will osteoclast cells do? Osteoclast cells will dig its way, and it passes through the bone area. if that is the bone area, it will passes through that, it causes bone resorption, so that make the route of the blood supply from the periosteum accessible to that calcified tissue. And also these osteoclast cells eat up that material, for example, eat up this material, so that uh, so that they there is an easy accessibility of the on the reaching of the osteoblast cells in the lacunar spaces which are already empty. Now will happen that what will happen that these lacunar spaces are then resorbed, they are undergo a resorption, they undergo a resorption, and also they're followed by osteoblastic cell forming matrix formation that result in the formation of marrow spaces. These actually marrow spaces are what? These are actually the spaces which are formed and in the places of those dead lacunae which do not have any chondrocytes present now, because the chondrocytes are already dead. So this is how the marrow spaces are formed, and this all process is taking place in the primary center of ossification. So this is how, because of the primary center of ossification, the diaphysis part of the bone is forming. The diaphysis part of the bone is forming. Now what happened is that now in this picture you can appreciate that there is already a periosteal layer. The marrow spaces are present, which are lined by the osteoblast cells. The osteoblast cells are secreting matrix. They are secreting matrix here surrounding that marrow spaces, and because of this, there is a slight, small, thin bone form that is called spongy bone. Spongy bone formed in around these spaces which are called the medullary spaces. Which are these called? The marrow spaces. Marrow spaces are now lined by the spongy bone. So up till now, what happens that initially in the chondrocyte, in the cartilaginous model, the initially the chondrocytes have increased in their size, also followed by increase in the matrix around it. This matrix has become calcified, and because of the calcification, no blood supply is coming to the chondrocyte, and the chondrocyte is now dead because it has undergone apoptosis. At the same time, the perichondrium is also replaced by periosteum, and from the periosteum, the blood vessels are coming to that lacunae, which is devoid of any chondrocyte, which is actually an empty space. Now, the mesenchymal cells are going to transform into osteoclasts and osteoblasts. The osteoclast cells will convert these lacunae into marrow spaces, and osteoblast cells will line these spaces. As you can appreciate, the red color dots, these are the osteoblast cells. These osteoblast cells will form matrix around it, and this is how a spongy bone is formed. So bone is a spongy bone layer is also present in the long bone. In the long bone, the spongy bone is also present. The outer layer is made up of the compact bone, whereas the inner layer is made up of the spongy bone. In the same time, this is in the diaphysis. In the epiphysis also, the outer layer is formed by the compact bone, because it is determining or defining the hardness of the bone, and the inner layer or the inner part is formed of the what? It is formed of the spongy layer, spongy bone. So spongy bone is also present in the long bones. It is also present in the flat bones as well. But the difference is that in the epiphyseal part, or this epiphysis, the spongy bone is devoid of any bone marrow. There is no bone marrow in it. So this is how the endochondral ossification is taking place. Now, for from this point of primary ossification center, the cells which are present here, or the cells which are present here, which are actually the chondrocytes, they will follow the same rule. It means, what is the rule? Hypertrophy initially, followed by increase in the matrix formation, which is moving around that chondrocyte. That matrix become calcified, which leads to death of the chondrocyte, and this is followed by a replacement of the chondrocyte by bone cells, bone tissue. So this is the same rule which is applying in this primary ossification center. So from this primary ossification center, the bone formation will move this way also, and this bone formation will move this way also. This all occurs till the birth of the baby, and this is why that because of the ossification center, there is a longitudinal growth of the bone is taking place. But there was a question that why there is a longitudinal growth, bone, how longitudinal bone growth take place and how radial growth of the bone take place. See, as we have told you earlier, already the chondrium is already been replaced by the periosteum. So this periosteum is also forming the bone. That's why till birth there are two types of growth take place. One is the longitudinal growth, and the other is the radial growth. The longitudinal growth is taking place because of the ossification center, and the radial growth is taking because of the periosteum. Okay, so this is how the thickness of the bone is also maintained, and this is how the length of the bone is also maintained. Now what happens at birth? After the birth, the actually at the time of when the baby is born, the diaphysis has already been has grown, has taken its development, but now the ends with these ends of this diaphysis, which are called the epiphyses, they are still to grow. So they will also follow the same rule, but there are initially there will be the ossification has to take place in these epiphyses, and that ossification is called secondary ossification. What is that called? Secondary ossification. So the secondary ossification will also follow the same rule. What is that rule? The rule is the same sequence, that chondrocytes are hypertrophied, followed by increase in the matrix, followed by decrease in the blood supply, and led by osteoblastic cells and osteoclastic cells taking the bone formation. So this is the same rule that are applied in the epiphyses of both ends. So when the epiphyses grow, it will grow from infancy to the early childhood, but the cartilage after the epiphysis has grown to its or epiphyseal growth has completed, only small amount of cartilage is present at the junction between diaphysis and the junction between epiphysis. This is called growth plate. This is called growth plate. So both the epiphysis and the growth plate, they grow after the birth. So this is the point which is very important. And the how the growth plate, or after the birth, what is the role of the cartilaginous model in the growth of the bone? You always should remember that the at after birth, this cartilage model is growing and forming the epiphysis, just like diaphysis, and also the growth plate formation, or the growth plate proliferation is taking place. And this is basically the growth plate proliferation that is responsible for the longitudinal length of the bone. So this is endochondral ossification. As far as the growth plate is concerned, one thing is important, that there are different, for example, if this is the growth plate, This is the growth plate, and there is this is the diaphysis of the bone, and this is the epiphysis of the bone. In the growth plate, there are different zones. First zone is the resting zone. In the cells are not proliferating. In the proliferating zone, the cells are arranged in the form of columns, and in the hypertrophy, they increase in the size. They then become calcified, and that calcified tissue is replaced by the bone, which is the same rule which is being followed in the growth of the diaphysis or even in the growth of the epiphysis. This is how the new bone is added up from the growth plate into the diaphysis. The new bone, for example, the new bone is added up by the growth plate. This following the same rule. This is how the longitudinal growth of the bone is taking place. But at birth, after 17 to 18 years of age in males or even in females, earlier age, the growth plate stops proliferating, and this growth plate then fuses or it is replaced by the bone itself. This is the time when no further growth can take place. And this is the so the point is that after the birth, there are still longitudinal growth and there is still radial growth. So, if somebody is going to ask you how there is a longitudinal growth, you will say that, sir, it is the growth plate that is responsible for the growth of the bone in the longitudinal direction. As far as the radial growth is concerned, it is in appositional growth. Apposition means that, for example, if this is the shaft of the bone, if this is the shaft of the bone, and these are the outer surface of the bone, the black color is the new bone. So when the new bone is formed, which in light green in color is the old bone, this old bone is replaced by the osteoclastic cells, and this is how the diameter or the radial diameter of the bone is increasing. So that is called the appositional growth, which is taking place. So sum up for, I'll say that endochondral ossification has two phases. One during intrauterine life, intrauterine life, and one is after birth. So in the intrauterine life, it is the primary center of ossification, plus the periosteum that is forming a longitudinal and the radial growth. Whereas after birth, it has an epiphysis formation and the growth plate, which is responsible for the longitudinal growth of the cell. Also, there is increase in the diameter of the bone by appositional growth. What is it called? Appositional growth of the diameter of the bone. This is, for example, if this is the bone and it is growing, now its diameter has increased. Why? Because the bone is forming layer by layer on the outer surface of the bone, and old bone is replaced by the osteoclastic cells. This is called bone remodeling or bone resorption. So this is all about endochondral ossification.